My name is Dulcie Fowler, and I am 38 years old. For 30 years, my family called me the dumb one, and I let them, because letting them was cheaper than telling the truth. I run a two-bay fabrication shop in Kellerton, Ohio. I weld. I build things that hold under load. I have never once read a contract in front of another human being. On the second Saturday of September, my family held its 30th reunion at the Grange Hall out on County Road 12, and my dad stood up with a microphone in his hand and told 60 people that I never amounted to anything. They laughed the polite kind of laugh, the kind that dies fast. My 11-year-old niece was sitting close enough to hear all of it. 20 minutes later, a man in a gray suit came through the back door with a leather case and put a check for $47 million in my hand, and the whole room stopped moving. That is the part everybody wants to hear about. That is not the part that matters. What my father did 20 minutes after that check landed is the thing I still cannot get through without stopping. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Tuesdays at my shop start at 7, and Tuesdays are for the mail. Hollis Dean drags the green steel chair away from the wall by the press brake, sits down with his knees apart, and reads the week out loud while I run a grinder. He was a pressman for 30 years before he came to work for me. He has a voice like a man reading a weather report to a room he trusts, flat and unhurried, and he never once asked me why we do it this way. Invoice from Kraus Steel, $4,160. Certificate renewal, due the 12th. Somebody in Bellefontaine wants a quote on 8 stair stringers. I keep grinding. I do not write anything down. By the time he sets the last envelope on the bench, I can tell you every number he said and what order they came in, because that is what my head does, instead of the other thing. Bo Keenan, who has worked for me 4 years, thinks it is a habit 2 old people got into. Bo is 34 and believes a lot of things about how the world works. Bo has no idea that in 14 years at this address, I have not opened a single piece of business mail by myself. Not one. There is a system, and the system is the whole reason the shop is still standing, and the system has exactly one moving part, and that part is a 66-year-old man in a green chair. That August, we got one last ordinary Tuesday, the kind where nothing in the stack was worth saying twice, and I had no reason to pay attention to it. Before I get to that envelope, I have to tell you about the phone call, because the phone call came first and it set the clock running. My mother, Corinne, calls the shop line instead of my cell because she says cell phones make her sound far away. She told me the reunion was set. 30th 1. Grange Hall on County Road 12, second Saturday of September, 4 o'clock, and everybody was bringing something they were proud of. That is a real thing in my family. There is a table by the door for it. Paul's continuing education certificates go up there in a folding frame he bought for the purpose. Nadine's building won a state recognition banner 2 years ago, and the banner has been to 4 reunions. Cousins bring commission letters and diplomas, and 1 year somebody brought a laminated newspaper clipping about a pig. Then my mother said the kind thing. She said, "Dulcie, honey, you don't have to bring anything for the table. Just bring a cake." She said it the way you'd tuck a blanket over somebody. She meant it that way too, which is the part I have never been able to explain to people who did not grow up in that kitchen. There is no cruelty in it anywhere. There is only a scoreboard, and everyone agrees on the scoring, and I have been off the board since I was 8 years old. I told her I'd bring the cake. I hung up, and I stood there with my hand still on the receiver, doing what I always do, which is nothing. The fall of 1996, I was 8 years old and in 2nd grade, and my teacher was a woman named Arlene Pruitt, who wore her glasses on a beaded chain. She asked my parents to come in after school. I sat on a plastic chair in the hallway with my shoes not reaching the floor, and I could hear most of it through the door, which they left open about a hand's width. Mrs. Pruitt said I was bright. She said it twice. She said I could do arithmetic in my head faster than she could do it on the board, and that I built a bridge out of craft sticks that held 11 textbooks, and that when she put a page of words in front of me, the letters would not hold still, and she wanted the district to test me. There was a pause. Then my father said the sentence that has been sitting in the middle of my life ever since, and he said it kindly, the way you'd explain a thing to a bank teller. Somebody has to read for her. That was all of it. My mother said, "Well, that's true." Mrs. Pruitt tried twice more. The folder closed. Nobody ever mentioned it again. The next night at dinner, my brother Paul, who was 14 and delighted with himself, said, "Pass the potatoes to the dumb one," and everybody laughed. And my father did not stop him. And that was the day the name got issued. 30 years later, that same man would say the same sentence into a microphone in a room with 60 people in it. My sister Nadine called me the second week of August, and she never calls me. Nadine is 41, and she is the principal of a middle school in Marysville, 22 miles from my shop. She had her professional voice on, which is how I knew she was scared. Ren's reading teacher had sent home a referral. The school wanted to run an evaluation. Nadine had not signed it. She had a whole answer ready, and she gave it to me in one breath, the way you give a speech you have already said in the car. She said a file follows a kid. She said she has watched files follow kids for 18 years, and she knows what happens when a label gets attached at 11, how the label starts making decisions the kid never gets to weigh in on. She said Ren is a late bloomer. She said her husband agrees. She said, and this is the part I keep, you of all people should understand what I'm protecting her from. I stood in the shop office with grinder dust on my forearms and I said nothing, because Nadine is not stupid. And Nadine is not cruel, and every single thing she said was true, and it was also the exact machinery that had been running on me since 1996, only now it had a college degree and a nicer vocabulary. She waited for me to agree with her. I said I had to get back on a job. She said, "So you agree?" And I said, "I have to get back on a job," and I hung up and stood there for a while. There is a building on Depot Street with plywood in two of the front windows and a sign across the top that says Fowler Machine and Tool, and it has been empty for 17 years. My grandfather put the sign up in 1971. My father ran the place from 1983 until the bank locked the door in 2009. Nobody has bought it because Kellerton has 940 people, and nobody needs 11,000 square feet of nothing. I park across the street sometimes, on my way back from the steel yard, and I sit with the engine off. I know what the roof needs. I know the 3-phase service is still in there because I climbed in through the loading side 4 years ago with a flashlight and checked it. I have a number in a coffee can in my apartment above the shop, and the number has been growing since I was 32, and it is not for a house or a truck or a trip anywhere. It is for that building. I want my name painted under my grandfather's name. I have never said that out loud to another person. Not to Hollis. Not to Bo. Not once in 6 years. You can decide for yourself how smart that is, wanting a thing that bad and telling nobody. In my defense, in my family, the fastest way to lose something is to let them know you want it. That August the realtor's sign went up in the window with the plywood, and I drove past it 4 times in 1 week, and the 4th time I stopped in the road like a fool with my blinker on and nobody behind me. I was 21 the year the bank took my father's shop. I was welding nights at a trailer plant in Marion and sleeping until noon, and I did not understand what was happening until it had already happened. Here is what I saw. In March of 2009, a man from the bank came to my parents' kitchen on Ridge Road with a folder, and my father sat at the table in a clean shirt with his hands flat on the oilcloth. The man explained something about the loan. My father asked him to go over it again. The man went over it again. My father asked a 3rd time, and I watched my father's ears go red, and then my father picked up the pen and signed it, because asking a 4th time was worse than signing. That is the entire thing. That is what I watched from the kitchen doorway at 20 years old, and I did not have the equipment to understand it. Whatever was in that modification let them revalue the collateral, and by October, the door on Depot Street had a padlock on it and a notice taped at eye level. My father never spoke about it once, not that year, not since. What he did instead was start reading out loud. Everything. Prescription labels at the kitchen table, warranty cards, the back of a soup can, once to my mother, who did not ask him to. If you had walked in, you would have thought he was showing off. He was not showing off. He was standing guard, and the thing he was guarding against had already gotten in, and he was 17 years too late. Now the envelope. It came certified, which means somebody has to sign for it, which means I had to stand at the shop door with a scanner in my face and put my name on a screen while a man waited. My name I can do. My name comes out of my hand without going through the part of my brain that fights me. The return address was a law firm in Columbus, and I knew the firm because that firm has been sending me things for 7 years, and every one of those things has been read to me on a Tuesday. Only this was a Thursday, and Hollis was home with a kidney stone. I carried the envelope out to the truck. I put it on the passenger seat. I picked it back up. I did that 3 times, in a gravel lot, at 4 in the afternoon, a grown woman who has certified welding procedures hanging framed in her office. Then I drove the 4 miles back to the shop and set the envelope on the bench in Bay 1 under the good light, squared up to the edge, and went and finished a handrail. I want to be honest about this because it is the whole shape of my life. I was not afraid of what was in it. I was afraid of the 15 minutes of my own head that opening it alone would cost me. It sat on that bench for 4 days. It was, I would find out later, the most expensive envelope in the state of Ohio. Hollis came back Tuesday. He got the green chair, he got his coffee, he got through the stack, and then he picked up the certified envelope and slit it with his pocket knife and started reading, and about 4 lines in his voice changed shape. He stopped. He started over from the top and read it slower. What it said was that Halverson Industrial Group was exercising its buyout option on the running royalty under our 2019 agreement. What it said was that the audit of their 2025 net sales had closed, and the underreported amount was $2,400,000. What it said was that the buyout of the remaining royalty term, 7.5 years to patent expiration in March of 2034, had been valued at $44,600,000. What it said, at the bottom, in a sentence with no adjectives in it, was that closing was set for Saturday, September 12th, and payment would be delivered on that date, $47 million even, because that is how the 2 numbers landed. Hollis put the page down on his knee. Bo had the plasma table running in Bay 2 and could not hear anything and never knew a thing about it that day. I stood there with a wire brush in my hand, and I asked Hollis for exactly one thing. I said, "Read me the date again." He read me the date again. Saturday, September 12th, 4 o'clock that afternoon, in a hall on County Road 12, my whole family was going to be standing around a folding table with their diplomas on it. I did not say that to Hollis. I did not say it to anybody. I put the wire brush down and I went back to the handrail, and we worked until 5 like it was any Tuesday in the world. You should know where the money came from, because everybody at that reunion later decided it came from luck. In 2013, I lost my biggest customer. They built battery enclosures, thin wall aluminum, and my weld fixtures were letting the panels creep about 4 thousandths out of square across a 30-inch run, and 4 thousandths does not sound like anything until it is stacked 8 welds deep. The buyer called me on a Friday and told me they were moving the work to Sandusky. I did not argue. I hung up, and I went out to Bay 2, and I turned on the overheads and I stood in front of the back wall. 12 feet of gray block wall. I had been drawing on it since I bought the place. Paint marker, freehand, everything in views and dimensions and arrows, and no words anywhere on it, because words on a wall are just a place for my eyes to fall down. For 3 weeks, I slept on a cot by the parts washer. I drew the clamp 40 different ways. The thing that finally worked was stupid and simple, a floating jaw on a tapered pin that let the fixture find the center of the part instead of forcing the part to find the center of the fixture. The part tells the tool where it is. That is all it does. I built the first one out of scrap 4140 on a Sunday, and Monday morning the panels came off the table dead square, and I called Sandusky and told them to keep their money and come look at something. It took a woman who cannot read a page of instructions to build a clamp that stops fighting the material. I have thought about that a lot, and I still cannot decide whether it is funny. In March of 2019, Halverson Industrial Group offered to buy the product line. 2 ways. $1.2 million. Cash. Done. Walk away. Or $400,000 at closing and 2.5% of net sales for as long as the patent lived, which was until 2034. My attorney read me both versions 4 times over 2 nights at her office in Columbus, and then I sat in my truck in a parking garage for an hour and thought about tapered pins and how many battery lines were going to get built in the next 15 years, and I took the second one. I did not tell my family. Paul found out anyway, because Paul knows a guy who does contract work for Halverson, and Paul brought it to Sunday dinner at Ridge Road like a casserole. He did the arithmetic out loud at the table with a pen on a napkin. He explained percentages to me. He explained that royalty streams are how companies pay you in imaginary money. He said, and I remember the exact sound of it, "Dulcie, you just turned down $800,000 because you didn't understand the paper." My mother said, "Paul." My father did not say anything, which in our house is a vote. Within a week, every person in that family knew. The name I had been carrying since second grade stopped being a joke about a kid and became a settled adult conclusion about a woman, and it happened on the exact day I made the best decision of my working life. For 6 years after that, at every holiday, somebody found a way to bring up the 1.2. Nobody ever asked me what the clamp did. My father came by the shop that Thursday to borrow my transfer pump, which he does twice a year and could buy for $60, but will not. He is 71. He still wears a collared shirt buttoned to the top in September heat, and his hands are bigger than mine by half. And every man in that town over 60 will tell you Russ Fowler was the best machinist in the county, and they are right. While he was there, a contractor named Del Marchetti came in about a quote on some mezzanine railing. Del asked me what the number would be. Before I got my mouth open, my father reached over, took the quote sheet off my bench, held it up at arm's length, and said, "Easy and warm. Let me see that. Somebody has to read for her." Del laughed. My father read the number out. It was my number. I had built it in my head from the linear foot, and the coding, and the 2 days of my life it would cost, and he read it out like a weather report, and Del shook his hand instead of mine. Then my father said thanks for the pump and went out to his truck, and when he opened the driver's door and leaned in for his gloves, I saw a piece of paper folded in quarters sitting in the door pocket, worn white along the folds the way paper goes when it has been opened and closed for years. I did not ask. In our family, you do not ask. And if you have ever had somebody answer a question that was asked of you, standing right there, in your own building, then you already know what that sounds like. Tell me in the comments. And subscribe, because this gets worse before it gets anywhere near better. I went to see the realtor about Depot Street on the 3rd Friday in August. Her name is Peg Lawler, and she has an office above the pharmacy with a window unit that drips into a coffee can. I had my system ready. My system is that I ask for the packet, I take it home, and I sit with it at my kitchen table for 2 nights with a ruler under the line, and by the 3rd pass, I own it. I have bought a building and 2 trucks and a 40-ton press this way. So I said what I always say, which is, "Let me take this home and look it over." And Peg said, "Oh, honey, I wish you could." There was another offer in as of Wednesday. A man out of Delaware County wants it for storage units. Seller wants signatures by Monday. She slid the purchase agreement across the desk and set a pen on top of it and folded her hands, kind as anything, waiting. 6 pages, small type. A window unit dripping. Somewhere below us, a truck going through the light. I sat there and I looked at the page, and the letters did what they do, which is not blur, exactly. People always want it to be blur. They swap. They hold still until you look right at them, and then 2 of them trade places when you blink, and the sentence you just built collapses and you have to build it again from the left edge. And there was a woman across the desk from me with her hands folded. So I signed my name on a page I could not read, in a room where everyone thought that was normal, and I drove back to the shop and did not go inside for a while. Ren comes to the shop most Thursdays because Nadine has late meetings, and Ridge Road is a long way for my mother to drive. She is 11, and she is the quietest kid I have ever been around, which is saying something. She sits on an overturned bucket by the drill press with her backpack between her feet, and she watches. The Thursday after that, she came in and sat down and unzipped the bag to get a granola bar, and a paper came half out with a lot of red on it, and she saw me see it, and she pushed it down along the side and then under the liner at the bottom, flat, with 2 fingers, smoothing it as she went. I know that motion. I invented that motion on a bus, on County Road 12, in 1996. There is a specific way you flatten a paper so it does not make a sound. I did not say anything about it. That is not because I am wise. It is because I could not think of one sentence to say that would not have ended with her feeling caught. So I asked her if she wanted to cut some scrap, and she said yes, so fast she knocked the bucket over. I set her up on the shear with the guard down and my hand on the hold down, and she made about 40 little steel rectangles she had no use for, and she smiled the entire time. And when Nadine texted that she was 10 minutes out, Wren zipped the backpack and went and stood by the door with it hanging off one shoulder like nothing had happened in there at all. She is 11 years old, and she is already better at this than I was. The next Thursday, I did something I had never done with another person in my life. I walked Wren into Bay 2 and hit the overheads. It takes the lights about 6 seconds to come up all the way, so she got it in stages. 12 feet of gray block from the electrical panel to the corner, floor to about 8 feet, covered edge to edge in paint marker. 14 years of it. Fixtures, jigs, a stair truss, the tapered pin in 9 positions, a rework of the shear guard, a thing I never built for lifting an engine out of a boat. White over black over white, where I had gone back over old work. Arrows, numbers, angles marked with a little box. And no words anywhere on that wall. Not a label, not a note, not my own initials, because a word on that wall would have been a hole I could fall into, and I had made myself a room with no holes in it. Wren stood in the middle of the floor and did not say anything for a while. Then she said, "Did you do all that?" I said I did. She said, "Where's the writing?" I said there isn't any. And then I took a white paint marker out of the coffee can on the bench and held it out to her, and I said, "The only useful sentence I have ever said to a child. Don't write it. Draw it." She took the marker. She stood there maybe 40 seconds with her arm down at her side, long enough that I started composing an apology. Then she went at the wall low, down where she could reach, and in about 11 minutes that girl laid out a chain guard for a bicycle, side view and section view, with the clearance called out, and the mounting tab in the right place, and a note-free little arrow showing which way the thing had to swing. It was correct. I did not correct one line of it. Behind me, the man door opened and Nadine walked in. We had it out in the gravel lot with the door shut behind us and Wren still inside with the marker. Nadine did not raise her voice. She never does. She is a principal. They train it out of you. She said, "What is that?" I said, "It is a wall." She said, "Dulcie, don't teach her there's a way around it." I said I taught her there's a way through it. And Nadine said something I have thought about every week since. She said, "You got to be 40 in a town where everyone knows you and nobody makes you fill out a form." My daughter is going to be in a room in 11 years with 180 other kids and one piece of paper each. And if I let them put a code on her file at 11, that code gets read by every single person who ever decides anything about her, and none of them will ever meet her. She was crying by the end of it, standing straight up in a lot full of steel, not wiping her face. I want to be fair here because it is the only way any of this makes sense. My sister was not protecting the family name. She was not protecting her career. She had watched the machine chew for 18 years from the inside, and she had decided the only safe move was to keep her kid off the paperwork entirely, which is exactly, precisely, to the letter, what our father decided about me in 1996 in a hallway with my shoes not touching the floor. She had reasons. He had reasons. The results are identical. She took Wren home. Wren waved at me through the back window and I stood in the lot until the taillights got to the road. The Tuesday after that, Hollis got through the mail and then did not get up. He sat in the green chair with his hands on his knees and told me his daughter in Mesa had put a down payment on a place with a casita on the back of it, and that his lungs did better out there in February, and that he would be gone in 3 weeks. He said he had already talked to a fellow from the church who could come in Tuesday mornings and do the mail. He said it carefully, watching me, the way you set a hot pan down. I said no. He said, "Dulcie." I said no, Hollis, and thank you. And I meant both of those, and I only said one of them right. Here is what I could not tell him. It took me 11 years to be able to sit in a room and let him read to me without my whole body going tight. 11 years to stop performing being busy while he did it. I did not have another 11 years, and I did not have another Hollis. And the idea of a man from the church learning the shape of me on a Tuesday morning made me want to walk into the parts room and shut the door. So I said no, and I said we'd figure it out. And he let it go, because he has always let me have my 1 square foot of pride. He is 66. He had been reading my life out loud to me since I was 24 years old. 14 years of Tuesdays, and I had 3 of them left, and I did not have any plan at all. That same week, Hollis took 2 days to go look at a truck. and a purchase order came through for a job in Urbana, and I decided I was a grown woman who could read a purchase order. It was one page. I sat with it for 40 minutes, with a straight edge under the line, a 1045 versus a 1054. That is all it was. I ordered 2,200 pounds of the wrong alloy, and it came off the truck Thursday, and it sat in the yard in the rain, and it cost me $6,400 I was never getting back, plus the job, because they needed it Monday, and I could not get material by Monday. Bo Keenan helped me unload it. He looked at the tag, and he looked at me, and he did not say a single word. All day, and I would rather he had said something. That night, I sat on the stairs outside my apartment above the shop, which is where I sit, and I did the thing I want you to understand. I did not think, I need help. I thought, I need this to never be visible again. And then I went inside and I called Grant Ashby at the firm in Columbus, and I told him that on Saturday the 12th, I would not be at the shop. I would be at the Grange Hall on County Road 12, and if he wanted a signature and wanted it before his escrow closed at 5, he could bring the check out there and find me any time after 4. He said he could do that. He said it in the voice of a man writing it on a calendar. I told myself it was about the deadline. It was not about the deadline, and I knew it was not, and I made the call anyway. The Kellerton Grange Hall has a low ceiling and fluorescent tubes, and one tube on the west end that has been flickering since the Clinton administration. 61 people, I counted at the door out of habit. 3 long tables end to end with red paper cloths taped down at the corners, potato salad, a roaster of shredded chicken, a coffee urn in the back kitchen that had been on since noon and smelled like it. Ceiling fans on speed 1, and by the front door, on its own folding table with a cloth of its own, the brag table. Paul had driven up from Columbus with 3 framed certificates and a photograph of himself at a podium, Nadine's banner, a cousin's commission letter from the Air Force, 2 diplomas standing up in those little easel frames, which from the doorway, all lined up, looked like something out of a small cemetery. I came in at 4:02 with a sheet cake in a plastic carrier, and I put it on the food table, because that is the table I was told to bring something to, and I have never in 30 reunions put a single item on the other one. My mother hugged me and said the cake looked lovely. Hollistein came in behind me at 10 after 4 in a clean shirt with his collar still creased from the package, because I had called him Friday night and asked him to be there, and I had told him it was in case there were papers. And he had said all right without asking one question. Bo drove him. Bo stood at the back by the coat hooks with a plate, and never sat down the whole time. My father was over by the coffee, holding court with 2 men he used to run second shift with, and when he saw me, he raised his chin about an inch, which is what he does. Wren was sitting at the end of the brag table on a folding chair with her hands in her lap, not touching anything on it, looking at all of it. Somewhere out on Interstate 71 north of Delaware, a man in a gray suit was sitting in Saturday construction, and I did not know that yet. And I kept looking at the back door about every 90 seconds like a woman waiting on a jury. At about 4:30, my father tapped a spoon on a coffee cup and picked up the wireless microphone the Grange keeps in a cabinet with the folding chairs, and everybody quieted down, because he is the oldest Fowler still standing, and this is what he does. He thanked everyone for coming. He talked about my grandfather and the shop on Depot Street, and how the first reunion was in 1996 in his own backyard with a card table. Then he went down the line. Paul, he said, is keeping half of Franklin County alive, one prescription at a time, and Paul lifted his cup. Nadine, he said, runs a school of 600 kids and got a banner from the state for it, and everybody looked at the banner. 2 cousins got their turn, and then he came to me, and he did not skip me. He has never once skipped me, and that is important, because being skipped would have been mercy. He looked over at me and he smiled, and it was an affectionate smile. I want to be exact about this. There was no meanness in his face at all. He said, "And Dulcie?" Well, Dulcie never amounted to anything, but she's still hanging on to that shop, thank the Lord, and she brought us a cake. And the room laughed. Not cruel. Polite. Warm. The laugh you give the man with the microphone, and it lasted about 2 seconds and then went away like a match. My mother laughed. Paul laughed. Somebody said, "Egg you, Russ." And down at the end of the brag table, an 11-year-old girl did not laugh. She turned her head, and she looked at me, and she kept looking, and I stood there holding a paper cup of coffee I did not want, with 61 people not looking at me at all. Behind me, the back door of the Grange Hall opened. He was maybe 52, gray suit, no tie, a leather case in his left hand, and he had the specific look of a man who has been in a car since 1 o'clock and has already decided not to complain about it. He stopped just inside the door and scanned the room the way you scan a room when you have never been in it. My father still had the microphone in his hand and had not put it down. The man said, "Excuse me, I'm looking for Dulcie Fowler." 61 people turned around. I said, "That's me." He came across the floor, and he did not look at anybody else, and he put his hand out, and he said, "Ms. Fowler, Grant Ashby, I'm with counsel for Halverson. I apologize for the venue. Traffic on 71 was a parking lot." Then he set the case flat on the corner of the food table, right next to my cake, and he opened it, and he said the sentence in the flat voice lawyers use for the thing they have done 400 times. He said, "This is the closing of the royalty buyout under your 2019 agreement. Escrow closes at 5. I need your signature here, and this is yours." And he handed me a check. I have handled a lot of objects. This one weighed nothing. It was a bank check with a security pattern on it and my name spelled right. And the number in the box was 47 million and no cents. And the number was also written out in words along the line beneath it. And I did not need to read those words because I already knew them. And that is the only reason I could stand there. Somebody's chair went over backward. My father still had the microphone on, and it was down at his side, pointed at the floor, and it picked up the sound he made and put it through the speaker on the wall behind the brag table. For about 9 seconds, standing in a Grange Hall under a flickering tube with a pen in my other hand, it was the best moment of my entire life. Then the room came back on. Paul got to me first, and Paul did the thing Paul does, which is arithmetic in the direction of somebody else's life. He said, okay, that's gross. That's not net. You're going to lose damn near half of that to federal and state. Do you understand that? Do you know what capital gains is? He was not being cruel. He was being useful the only way he knows how, out loud, at volume, in front of everyone, immediately. My mother got there a second and put both arms around me and cried into my collar, and she had not held on to me like that since I was in my 20s, and I stood there with the check in my hand and my arm out to the side so I would not bend it. Phones came up. My cousin Renata, who has not called me in 6 years, filmed the check. 2 men my father used to run second shift with came over and shook my hand and asked what the company was called. Somebody wanted to know if I was going to buy a place in Florida. Somebody wanted to know if the shop was for sale. Grant Ashby stood at the corner of the food table with the signed pages under his arm, in no hurry at all, watching a family the way you watch weather. And here's the thing I did not notice until later that night, when I was sitting on my stairs. Not one person in that hall asked me what I built. They asked what I was going to do with it, and what I was going to lose off of it, and whether they could see it. Nobody asked what the thing was. If your family has ever done the math out loud in front of you like that, put a 1 in the comments so I know. And subscribe, because the next 20 minutes are the only reason I am telling any of this. My father waited until the noise had crested and started coming down. Then he set the microphone on the table, went out to his truck, and came back in with the old brown leather case he has had since before I was born. And everybody made room for him because everybody always makes room for him. He put it on the red paper cloth and unbuckled it and took out a document in a blue cover, thick, with those little colored flags sticking off the side, and he set it down and he smoothed it once with the flat of his hand. He said, "Now, before anybody gets excited," he said, "that kind of money brings people out of the woodwork, and I've seen it, and I'm not going to watch it happen." He said, "Barb Craft's boy drew this up. It's a trust, and there's a power of attorney with it, and I'd be on it with her. That's all. 2 names instead of 1, so nothing moves unless 2 people say so. Somebody said that's smart. Somebody said that's what I'd do." And my father turned to the room. Not to me, to the room, and he said it. "Somebody's got to read for her. I'd rather it was family." 11 people nodded. My mother said, "Russ, that's good thinking." And I was standing close enough that I could see the bottom corner of the first page where the drafting date sits. Small, the way lawyers do it. July. Not that afternoon. Not that week. July. The check in my hand was 20 minutes old. That paperwork was 8 weeks old. And I stood there in a room full of people I have known my whole life and understood finally, all at once, the way you understand a sound in your house at 3 in the morning that my father had known since June. Nadine got me by the elbow and walked me into the coat hallway by the restrooms where the floor is a different color, and she was lit up. She was almost happy. And it had nothing to do with the money for herself. I want that on the record. She said, Dulcie, Ridgemont. And I said, what? And she said, Ridgemont Academy. Out past Dublin? It's $28,000 a year, and they don't test anybody. They don't do referrals. They don't do files. A kid just goes there and gets taught. She had the whole thing ready. She had clearly had it ready for a while, and had been waiting for a world in which she could say it. She said rent could start in January. She said she'd pay me back, which we both knew was a thing you say. And then she put her hand on my arm and said, she'll never have to be labeled. You of all people should want that for her. Down the hall, through the doorway, I could see into the big room. I could see my father's blue folder on the red paper. I could see Paul explaining something to a cousin with his hands. And I could see Wren, still at the end of the brag table, in the same folding chair, with her hands in her lap, not touching one single thing on that table, looking at all those framed papers standing up in a row. $28,000 a year to make sure nobody ever writes anything down about her. It would work too. That is the part that took the floor out from under me. It would work. For about 11 years. And then it would stop working. And she would be 38 years old standing in a gravel lot with a certified letter she could not open. That was the first minute of that entire night that I understood what my father actually built. I went into the Grange kitchen to get away from all of it for 1 minute. It is a narrow room with a pass-through window, a commercial sink from about 1978, and that coffee urn that had been sitting on since noon and had gone to tar. Wren was at the sink with the water running, washing her hands, and she had been washing them a while, long enough that they were red. I stood beside her and turned the tap off for her. She kept her hands under the dry faucet. She did not look up. She said, Aunt Dulcie, are you the dumb one? She said it exactly like that. Not mean, not even sad. She said it the way you ask somebody whether a thing is load-bearing, because she needed to know what the building was made of before she decided how much weight to put on it. And I had a sentence ready. I have had that sentence ready since about 2004. It goes, oh honey, it's just a joke they've had going forever. Don't you worry about it. And it comes out smooth and light, and it closes the subject, and it has worked on 4 different children in this family. I opened my mouth to say it, and I could hear the room through the pass-through window, the fans and the forks and my brother's voice. And I thought about a folding chair and a table full of framed paper she would not touch, and I could not get that sentence out of my mouth. I stood there in a kitchen that smelled like burnt coffee and did not answer an 11-year-old for what felt like a very long time. I told her I'd be right back, and I walked out of that kitchen and back into the big room, and my father was standing at the middle table with the blue folder open and a pen held out toward me. Cap off, barrel first, the polite way. He said, come on, Dulcie, let's get this squared away tonight so nobody has to worry. And then, one after another, 3 people offered me a way out. Hollis stood up from a folding chair by the wall and said, I'll read it, boss. Take me 2 minutes. Bo, at the back, straightened up like he was going to bring him a chair. Then my phone buzzed in my hand, because I had called my attorney from the coat hallway, and she had called back. And Adele Marsh was on the line, and when I put her on speaker, she said, Dulcie, do not sign anything. Hold the phone up to the pages and read me the headings, and I will tell you exactly what that is. And then Nadine came in from the hall and put her hand out for the folder and said, here, give it to me. I'll go through it. 3 doors, all of them open, all of them warm, every one of them held by somebody who loved me, and every single one of them kept my secret exactly where it had been sitting since 1996. My father waited with the pen out. 61 people waited, and I took the check out from under my arm and I laid it face down on the red paper tablecloth, and I picked up the blue folder, and I said the only thing I have ever said in that hall that I would say again. Nobody reads from me tonight. Then I read it out loud. It took about 4 minutes. If you have never sat through 4 minutes of anything, I promise you that you have. I started at the top with the title line, and I got the word revocable on the second try, and then I hit irrevocable 8 lines down and lost it completely, and I had to go back to the left margin and build the sentence again from the start, and I did that 3 separate times on the first page. I read agent as agreement. I read the word deposit and then stopped, because it was not deposit. My voice stayed level. That is the one thing I had, and I held on to it. There is a sound a room makes when 61 people all decide at the same time not to move, and it is not silence. It is fans and a flickering ballast and somebody's chair leg. Somebody near the coffee urn laughed once, and then did not laugh again, because nobody laughed with him. My mother looked down at the table and kept looking there. Paul started forward and said, "Dulcie, just let me," and I said no, without looking up, and I said it in the voice I use on the shop floor when a man is about to put his hand somewhere it should not go, and Paul stopped where he was. Bo Keenan stood all the way up off the wall. Hollis sat back down. Wren had come out of the kitchen and was standing in the doorway with her hands still wet. I got to the third page. Third page is where the working part of a document lives. Always. They never put it up front. And I found the paragraph, and I read it slowly, and then I read it again out loud a second time so that everyone in that hall heard it twice, that the co-trustee's signature would be required for any transfer, sale, encumbrance, or distribution of trust property, and that the power of attorney survived my incapacity and could not be revoked while I was incapacitated. 2 names instead of 1, exactly like he said. He had not lied about a single word of it. He had only counted on nobody in the room ever being able to check. I set the folder down on the red paper and squared it up to the edge, because that is what my hands do. Then I said the word. I said, "I have dyslexia." I said, "Nobody ever tested me," and I have never once said that sentence out loud in my life, and it took me until I was 38, because for 30 years the arrangement in this family was that we would all agree I was slow, and nobody would have to look at it again. I said, "Mrs. Pruitt asked to test me in the fall of 1996, and my father said no in a hallway at the elementary school, and I was 8. I told them there is an adult reading clinic at the university, that the evaluation is $2,400, that insurance does not cover it, that I got on the list in June and my appointment is Monday morning at 9, and that I made that appointment 11 weeks before any check existed." Nobody said anything. My father's face did not change at all, and that was somehow the worst part of the whole night. And then I turned to the doorway, where an 11-year-old girl was standing with her hands held out from her sides, like she'd forgotten they were attached to her, and I asked her the question in front of every person we are related to. I said, "Wren, will you come with me?" She said yes before I finished it. She said it fast and loud, the way she'd said yes to the shear, and it came out of her like something that had been sitting on her chest for a year, and my sister stood up so fast her chair went over. My father did not shout. I need you to understand that about him. In 71 years, I have never heard that man raise his voice, and what he does instead is lower it, and everybody leans in, and that is how he has run every room he has ever been in. He said quietly, so that only the front 2 tables really got it, "All I have ever done is try to make sure nobody takes it off you the way they took it off me." And then he reached into his shirt pocket, the one he keeps buttoned, and he took out a piece of paper folded in quarters, worn white along every fold, soft as cloth at the corners, and he opened it part way and laid it on the table next to my face-down check. I did not have to read it. I knew what it was from across the room, because I had watched it get signed at a kitchen table on Ridge Road in March of 2009, while a man from the bank explained it 3 times. 17 years he had carried it. He said, "They had me sign that with a pen they handed me." He said, "Paper never once asked me how hard I worked." And I said, "I know it didn't, Dad." I said it and I meant it, and I was not being kind, I was agreeing with him, because he was right. And everything he built out of being right had come to rest on the table in a blue cover with little colored flags on it. Then I said, "I'm still not signing it." He looked at me for a while. He folded the 2009 paper back along its own creases. He picked his hat up off the table, and he said goodnight to my mother, and he walked out the side door into the parking lot, and he did not say sorry. and he did not look back. And I have gone over it 100 times, and I do not believe he thought he had done anything wrong. Nadine came around the end of the table and took Ren by the wrist. She was crying and furious at the same time, and her voice broke in the middle and she said, "You did that in front of my daughter. You did that in front of my daughter, Dulcie." And she was out the door with the kid before I could put a word together, and Ren looked back at me from under her mother's arm the whole way across the lot. After that, the hall emptied the way a hall empties, which is all at once and very politely. People came by in ones and twos and shook my hand fast and said congratulations and did not meet my eyes and went out to their cars. My cousin Renata deleted nothing and said nothing. Grant Ashby had his signed closing pages by 10 of 5 and could have been on the road inside of a minute, and he was still standing at the corner of the food table at 6:30. When the room had cleared, he shook my hand and said, "Ms. Fowler, congratulations." And he said it like he meant it. And then he went out to his car and drove back to Columbus. My mother packed the cake into its carrier and put a lid on it and set it by my purse and touched my shoulder on the way past and did not say anything at all. And then it was me and Hollis and Beau and a room with the fan still on. So here is the accounting, since my family likes to do the math out loud. I got my own voice, in front of everybody, for the first time in 30 years. I got the girl. And it cost me my father, my sister, and the only thing I had ever been good at, which was making sure nobody ever found out. Depot Street closed on the 14th of October. The man from Delaware County withdrew his offer about 90 seconds after he heard who else was bidding, which is the only genuinely funny thing that happened all fall. I paid cash, $310,000, out of a pile that was a great deal smaller than the number on that check by the time the federal and the state were through with it, and Paul was right about that, and I have told him so once. The roof took until December. The new sign went up the first week of November, and it says, Fowler Machine and Tool, and under that, EST, 1971, reopened 2026, and under that, small, hand-lettered by a woman who is very good with a brush and did not ask me why, it says, "Draw it first." Hollis left for Mesa on the last Saturday in September. The green chair is still where it was. Nobody sits in it. What I do now is this. Every Tuesday morning at 7, I take one page of whatever came in, and I read it out loud in Bay 1 with the door open, and Beau standing there with his coffee. And I get things wrong, and Beau says the word, and we go on. It takes me a while. Tuesdays, nobody reads for me. The clinic evaluation came back in November, and it says what we all knew it was going to say, and it did not change one thing about how fast I read, because there is no version of this where a woman goes into a room at 38 and comes out fixed. I still need 20 minutes for a page of contract. The difference is where I stand while I do it. Nadine did not speak to me for 4 weeks. Then on a Wednesday in the middle of October, she signed the consent form and had Ren evaluated. And she called me afterward, and she did not apologize, and neither did I. And what she said was, she asked me a question in the car, and I couldn't answer it. That was the whole conversation. It was enough. Ren has an IEP now, a code on a file, the exact thing her mother was trying to save her from, and she also comes to Bay 2 on Saturday mornings. And there is a section of that wall down low that is hers, and she has filled about 6 feet of it. My father has not called. Not in October, not in November. He did not come to Thanksgiving at my mother's, or rather he came, and I did not, which my mother handled by making 2 plates. But on a Monday morning in the middle of November, I came down the stairs and unlocked the shop, and there was a piece of paper on the bench in Bay 1, folded in quarters, worn white along the folds. No note, no envelope. He has a key to the yard gate from the old days, and he never gave it back, and I never asked for it. I did not chase him down about it. I also have not thrown it away. It is in the drawer with the certification papers, and some mornings I take it out and look at it, and it is still a loan modification from March of 2009 with a man's signature on the bottom line, and it is still the only thing my father has ever handed me without reading it to me first. The Fowler Christmas card went out in December, and it lists everyone's degrees, and it always will. They were never wrong that somebody had to read for me for 30 years. They were only wrong about who I had been waiting on the whole time. That's my story. One toast, one check I laid face down on a paper tablecloth, and a niece who draws before she writes. If somebody in your family has been carrying a name since they were 8 years old, ask them about it this week, out loud, with nobody else in the room. And if this reached you, send it to the person you thought about while you were listening.